Module 18, Issues in Text Corpus Generation. So in this module, we will try to describe in brief the major issues that are linked with generation of a text corpus, and all our discussions will be based on the TDIL corpus and with reference to the problems, issues, challenges that we faced in the generation of the TDIL corpus. In our earlier modules, we have informed you that in a pan-Indian frame, the technology development of Indian languages, a project relating to corpus development in Indian languages, started in early 90s, to be more precise, in 1991. Since I was involved from the very beginning of this project, and since I had to collaborate with other members of the team to design certain principles, some methodologies, strategies for developing these corpora in Indian languages. At that particular point of time, we had considered several issues, several facts, and all those things will be discussed here in brief, so that we can have some ideas how this thing has been developed and processed. There are several issues directly linked with generation of corpus. The basic thing is something like that when we are thinking that we should develop a corpus, we need to be very much careful what are the major issues that can be related to it. First question, let me ask, is that the size, which I have repeatedly said that the size of a corpus has to be very big, because size confirms that most of the data accumulated from the particular language or a variety actually representing the language in a very large scale. Size also entails that the evidences, the examples, or the conclusions or analysis which you make on the data is more faithful, more reliable, because it has been applied, implemented, and tested on large amount of data. So size is a big thing in corpus generation. Although we know that there are many corpora which are very small in size, maybe say 1 lakh sentences, 1 million words or something like that. But it is always better to have large number of words, running texts in the corpus database. And since in this period of time, at present, generation of corpus in digital form, that too with a large amount of data, is not a challenging task as it was nearly 20 years back. We can definitely go for a large collection of data in the form of a corpus. Next issue is the representation of text types. This is really a very crucial issue, since our target is to make a particular corpus a reference corpus or a full-fledged general corpus that will represent the particular a language or a variety. It is rational that we should have texts from various sectors, various frames, various situations, and various types of domains wherefrom we can have. So in cases of the TDIL corpus, we made it very clear that our corpus should be as much representative as possible. So text should come not only from formal writings, it should also come from informal writings like personal diaries, like personal letters, personal wills, personal notes, and other things. So it was also decided that text should be maximally representative in sense that all kinds of texts, informative texts, media texts, imaginative texts, advertisements, everything should be there. So while we are thinking about say uh, imaginative texts, we are talking about uh, novels, fictions, some essays, fantasy writings, and other things. But whenever we are talking about scientific text or informative text, we mostly concentrate on text related to science and technology and engineering and social sciences and other disciplines. Also, a huge part of the corpus actually coming from the text produced in newspaper. So, newspaper text is also a major part which has been considered in compilations of the TDL corpus. So, thus, we are trying to have a kind of balanced representations of the texts available in the language inside the corpus, because the target is to make the corpus maximally representative of a particular language or variety for which it is developed. Determination of time span, another important issue. So whenever we are trying to develop a corpus, the normal question is, what kind of time should be represented in the corpus? That's a very important question. So, based on the requirements of the target users, or based on the requirement of specific linguistic research, we can have a corpus of different types. It can be synchronic, it can be diachronic, it can be spread over the years, or it can refer to a text of a particular time. Suppose we are trying to develop a diachronic corpus. So logically, it stands that the corpus should be developed in such a way that it captures the continuous change of in the language as a good representation inside the text database. If I try to develop a Bangla diachronic corpus, I must have certain examples or certain amount of data from Old Bengali texts, Middle Bengali texts, and Modern Bengali texts. But since we know that that cannot be properly evenly distributed, because the texts which are available at Old Bengal period is not very large. Moreover, there is no prose writings in those periods, so we cannot include those text part. So we can have only some poetic creations, Old Bengali documents or textbooks that can be part of the Old Bangla text corpus. So if we think that we should have only the texts produced in last one decade, we can also do that. In fact, the TDIL corpus, which was being developed at the time, it was decided that to make a corpus diachronic is a very difficult task, because paucity of data of earlier years, non-availability of text materials of earlier centuries are the major hindrances. So, it was decided that we should concentrate on a small span of time, say 10 years time. So, whatever published or produced within that time span, within the decade, should be considered as eligible candidates to be included into the corpus. So, for the TDL corpus, the time frame was for only 10 years, 1981 to 1990. This has certain limitations. This has also certain advantages. The first question is that why that particular time span was decided to be included into the corpus. This is a crucial issue to be addressed. So, our answer was something like this, that to find when the project started in 1991, we realized that finding documents of the much earlier period, say before 1950 or 1960, was a little bit difficult. It was not easily accessible. But the materials, particularly books, are easily available of the earlier decade. So that was one of the motivations that led us to concentrate on the earlier decade. Second important thing which we personally realized is that finding out texts, particularly from newspapers, periodicals, magazines, government documents, which has been published much before, it was really difficult to get. So it was comparatively easier that we could get certain materials, certain amount of materials related to newspapers, magazines or periodicals, which has been published a few years ago, maybe say in 1981 or 82, 83, that too with a lot of effort. But to find a newspaper which has been published in 1950 and to collect data from that part is really tough job, because there are a lot of financial issues involved with it, a lot of technical issues involved with it. We have to pursue the newspaper houses, we have to request them to allow us to access their archives. So a lot of problems are involved with it. Even then, it was not possible to collect the data. So for our TDL corpus, only the immediate preceding earlier decade was considered. So the advantage was that TDL corpus can now boast that the texts produced within this time span is best represented in this corpus. So this is actually a replica, a small representation of the huge amount of data produced within this decade. So since this is the beginning part, it is assumed that let there be the data of this decade first. Then, if possible, we can go in such a way that every decade we can have equal amount of data in equal format, so that after half a century we can have a huge database, a large database of language diachronically developed in a systematic order, having a uniform pattern, so that we can have a very clear-cut idea about the changes taking place in the language and capturing the representations or the changes within the text of the corpus. So for the TDL corpus, time span selection was a crucial issue, and after much debate, a particular time span which could allow us to collect data in a most sensible manner was decided. Next issue was selection of the documents. What kind of documents we should take? Whereupon we should take the materials. So we have understood the documents are available mostly of 3 or 4 types. One is that printed documents. One other side is a non-printed documents. So it's very simple or very explicit and understood that our emphasis would be on the printed documents. Again, we needed to classify those documents in the different part. Printed documents produced as for common access, general access, and printed documents produced for restricted use, limited use. Say for government circulars is not meant for all. Circular given in offices. The legal documents usually don't go for all. The medical documents don't go for all. But even for the newspaper documents, texts are available for all. So we have to keep in the balance that what kind of documents should come into the general corpus and in which proportion. Then there is an issue of unpublished documents. I have already mentioned that personal diaries, personal letters, personal wills, personal notes. So those things were not available yet directly. So we have to go to certain people who have got those materials, and they have to these are to be collected and adequately processed and included into in the part of the documents. So the decision for the TDL corpus was something like that. So we should consider all kinds of documents available to us for collecting data. So, all the documents which are available readily in different forms should be assembled together, then checked manually. The next issue was selection of newspapers. This is a very dicey situation. So when the project started in 1991, we thought that it was decided that at least 1 million data should directly come from newspaper texts. And since we decided the time span is from 1981 to 1990, we must have newspaper texts of this period. So, we had to do a lot of rigorous planning. What kind of newspaper should be taken into consideration, how much data should come from those newspapers, and how to procure those newspapers. These are really tough problems, very crucial or critical issues. Consider that, say, for Bangla, when the project started, there are at least 6 daily, largely circulated newspapers. And in the decade also, they had full circulations. So now, the question is, if we need to have equal representations of text from these newspapers, then, and the total target is 1 million words from the expanding for the whole decade, we have to be highly selective. If we assume that a single newspaper has at least 5 to 10,000, 50 to 1 lakhs of words in a single day, then 1 million words reaching the target of 1 million words is not a big deal. So only say 20 to 30 newspapers will suffice our requirement. So if it is that only 50 or maximum at best 50 newspapers are required throughout the years, then one has to be very much selective. Because the total words available from these 50 newspapers will fulfill our requirement. So what we did, we said that these papers should be evenly distributed among the years. Say 4 newspapers from first year or 5 newspapers from, so since it's a 10-year span, so from each year we should have at least 5 newspapers. So from each year, if there is 5 newspapers and 5 newspapers are published every year, then we can have only 1 newspaper from 1 year for each newspaper. So what happened in 1981? We got 5 newspapers, one from Anand Bazar, one from Bartaman, one from Ganashakti, one from Ajkal, and one for Jugantar or something like that. So notice that these 5 newspapers were actually representing the whole year. And again, so it is very difficult to identify which newspaper or which date should be taken from the newspaper. So it was decided, okay, so maybe these 5 copies of the newspaper, 5 different houses, should be evenly distributed within a year also. Thus, we collected, say, 50 newspapers across the decade, and data was meticulously collected from those newspapers to be included into the dictionary. Since our target was only 1 million words from the newspapers, and you can identify the range of the amount of data available from newspapers published within the decade is huge. So, collecting 1 million data from a huge load of data available in newspapers was a real challenge. But somehow, we had a followed a very uniform manner and very systematically selected those newspapers represent the entire decade and collected large representative samples from the newspapers to, to complete the news text part of the corpus. Then another major issue was selection of books. This is another complex task. As you know that we had decided that okay, the subject areas would be say around 85 different disciplines where from the text should come, and the entire total words for this text should be 1 million words. For 2 million words for books. Newspaper has 1 million words, and books and journals should have 2 million words. So again, you can understand that in a decade, if there are 85 different disciplines, you can really understand how many books are being produced and published. In our estimation, when we followed the publishers and booksellers guide produced from the West Bengal, Kolkata, we noted that within 1 decade, within 1 year, more than 10,000 books are produced. So it is very difficult to select those books which are published within this decade to be included into the corpus. Moreover, those books were not evenly distributed in the sense that in all disciplines the number of books are not same. As it's very clear that in common sciences, in literary texts, in imaginative kind of text, you can kind of large amount of books produced as fictions or novels or short stories. But if you go for medical science or to engineering or to technology or some other areas, it becomes very difficult to identify or to find out good books which is published, or the number of books is very less. So since we evenly distributed that this certain amount of words should come from those all disciplines, so we were meticulous, we were sincere, we were careful to collect the books from all those disciplines. So finally, we are able to collect a large collection of books, which are ultimately decided after much debate to be considered to be included into the corpus project. There was another important issue involved into it. This is that many books, it was clearly stated in our agenda that those books which are published within the time span of 1981 to 1990 should be considered for inclusion in the corpus. Now the problem starts is that many books were published before that. Then the second edition or reprint are published within this time span. Now the question is, since the first publication of the book, publication date of the book is far beyond or much earlier than the time selected for our project, and whether those books should be included into the corpus. So initially there are a lot of debates on it. Ultimately, after much discussions, it was decided that since these books are published, reprinted, re-edited and reproduced within this time span, it implies that they have still functional or applicational or referential or academic values to the community. And since these books have justified their existence within this decade, they are equally eligible to be considered for collection of data from these resources. So thus, many of the books, particularly some books produced by Taggart, were published much earlier but republished within this decade are considered to be included into the corpus. Then, the major issue was selection of writers. Whose writings should come into this? Here, whether all famous writers or less famous writers, major writers or minor writers, very widely known writers, widely read writers, or less read writers. So these are the various issues also came up at the time of selection of writers. But ultimately, what we decided is very clear. Since it is a general corpus, and meant to represent the language used by, not by a specific few widely known writers, but to represent the language of the multitude of less known, unknown, common writers. Emphasis should be more on those less known writers because their contribution is much larger than a few well-known writers. So their text should be taken into consideration. So people coming from all walks of life, those who have written any book, any text produced and available to us are included into it. Equal emphasis is also given to the female writers also. It is not only the male writers that are considered. The contributions of female writers are equally important to be included in the corpus. And we did that. We were maximally democratic in our approach in selection of writers. So alongside those famous writers, we have given more emphasis on the text produced by less known, unknown, uncommon writers, so that our texts can be much more widely representative of the language community or the language we want to represent, we have to capture in the corpus. The next issue or the final issue about regarding this was the identifications of target users. As we have discussed in earlier modules, that each corpus has its immediate users. This identifies immediately who are supposed to be using the data or the corpus developed. So that was also has to be determined for us. It was also determined who are going to use this data. So for us, it is very clear. This corpus which we are trying to or we develop is not meant for only a specific set of people interested on specific properties of the language. This is a general reference corpus. That means the users of this corpus can come from any walks of life, from any sphere of life. Those who are interested into the text, into the body or the texture of the language can utilize this corpus. So, the application potential of this corpus is wide and maximally useful for all domains of research and development activities. But at the same time, our basic focus was something like that this would be a ready resource for the people now engaged in the tasks of language technology, computational linguistics, natural language processing, as well as for the people who are directly involved with language and linguistics. Those who are compiling dictionaries, those who are developing grammars, those who are developing text materials, those who are compiling term databases, those who are developing word books, or those who are developing new grammar or analyzing sentences of the language. So they can easily they can easily utilize the data and information from the corpus. So, to conclude, let us say that this corpus, which has been developed, now available most of the time for most of the Indian languages in the Unicode format, is meant to be a general common national resource, open for all kinds of applications, use, reference, and utilizations in various domains of mainstream linguistics, language technology, and in allied disciplines. Thank you.